Dear learners, welcome back to WSE True Stories, where English learning becomes an unforgettable adventure. Today, we invite you to join us on a journey that begins in the quiet corners of a curious mind and ends up shaking the very foundations of how we see the universe. This is not just a story about physics. It's about the invisible forces that shape our world, time, space, energy, and one man's relentless curiosity that dared to ask, what if everything we thought we knew was wrong? Albert Einstein. The name alone conjures the image of wild white hair, genius equations, and theories most of us can barely pronounce. But behind the math, there was a human story of rejection, loneliness, wonder, and a desire to understand the universe not for fame, but for truth. As a boy, he was seen as strange. As a young man, he was unemployed and overlooked. Yet somehow, he became one of the most revolutionary thinkers in human history. How? And at what cost? This story will not only improve your English and deepen your vocabulary, it will stretch your imagination, inspire your courage, and perhaps, change the way you see your own potential. Get ready for one of the most powerful and most motivational journeys into science, humanity, and the magic of a questioning mind. Let's begin the story of Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in the small city of Ulm, in the Kingdom of Württemberg, part of the German Empire. He was not born into wealth, nor into a family of scholars. His father, Hermann Einstein, was an engineer and salesman, running a small company that manufactured electrical equipment. His mother, Pauline, was a talented pianist who filled their home with music and discipline. They were secular Jews, culturally connected to their heritage, but more focused on education and personal growth than religious tradition. From the beginning, Albert's early years were not what one might expect of a future genius. As a baby, he developed slowly, so slowly, in fact, that his parents worried he might have a learning disability. He rarely spoke, and when he did, he often repeated sentences softly to himself before saying them aloud. To others, this behavior seemed odd. But to Albert, it was a way of making sense of the world. The family moved to Munich when Albert was still a toddler. There, his father and uncle founded an electrical company, and Albert was introduced to the wonders of machines, magnets, and wires. The modern age of electricity was just beginning, and Albert watched with wide eyes as the invisible power of current flowed through copper coils, lighting up lamps and driving motors. He didn't just observe, he questioned. He was 5 years old when he received a small compass from his father, bedridden with illness at the time. As he watched the needle mysteriously point north, never changing direction no matter how he turned it, he became obsessed. Why does it always point that way? What is guiding it, even when nothing is touching it? That simple compass sparked a lifelong obsession with the unseen forces of nature. Albert's formal education, however, was far less inspiring. German schools at the time were rigid, discipline-heavy, and deeply traditional. Teachers demanded obedience and memorization, not creativity or exploration. Albert, who loved thinking freely and questioning authority, clashed with this structure. He often felt out of place, misunderstood, and even unwanted. Despite his apparent intelligence, he was no teacher's favorite. He hated rote learning and resented being told what to think. Imagination is more important than knowledge, he would later say, but in those early school years, imagination was not welcome. Yet even in that structured world, something else began to shape him: loneliness. He had few friends, and often wandered in his own mind, dreaming about light beams, space, and time. While other children played, Albert pondered invisible forces. But the world wasn't going to make it easy for a dreamy child to grow into a man of science. The pressure to conform would soon become heavier, and Einstein's journey of rebellion was only just beginning. As Albert grew older, the gap between his inner world and the world around him widened. By the time he reached adolescence, his teachers had already labeled him a lazy dog. He wasn't lazy, of course, he simply didn't learn the way they expected. He refused to memorize dates or repeat facts without understanding them. He asked too many questions. He thought too deeply. And in a system built on obedience and conformity, that made him a problem. One of his teachers even told him directly, "You will never amount to anything." Imagine hearing those words as a teenager, spoken by the very person who's supposed to guide your growth. But Albert was already forming a quiet resistance. He taught himself advanced mathematics in secret. He read philosophy and science on his own, long before his classmates even heard of such subjects. Euclid's geometry fascinated him. Newton's laws intrigued him. But still, he felt stifled. At age 15, his family was hit by financial trouble. The electrical company failed due to new technology and tough competition. Forced to seek better opportunities, the Einsteins moved to Italy, first to Milan, then to Pavia. But Albert stayed behind in Munich to finish school. He was left alone, living with strangers, forced to endure the very educational system he despised. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. He ran away. Left school, packed his things, and joined his family in Italy without telling anyone, not even the school. It was a scandal, and it meant he was a dropout. No diploma. No plan. And yet, that bold move was Einstein's first real step toward reclaiming his life on his own terms. Now in Italy, he was finally free to think, to read, to reflect. He studied physics and philosophy with intensity. But he knew he needed a formal education to move forward. His dream was to attend the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich, a prestigious university known for its more liberal, modern approach to education. At just 16 years old, Einstein applied, 2 years younger than most applicants. He passed the math and physics sections with flying colors. But he failed the rest of the entrance exam, particularly in languages and biology. It could have been the end. Another door slammed shut. But once again, life didn't follow the script. The school's director, impressed by Einstein's scientific ability, encouraged him to complete high school in nearby Aarau, Switzerland. There, the environment was more relaxed, more curious, more human. For the first time, Albert felt encouraged rather than controlled. He flourished. At 17, he was accepted into the Polytechnic. He was finally on the path he had dreamed of, surrounded by science, discussion, and open-minded learning. And yet, even in this new environment, another challenge was growing. Einstein would soon discover that being smart wasn't enough. The academic world had rules, hierarchies, politics, and for someone who still preferred thinking independently, blending in would never be easy. Einstein began his studies at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich in 1896. It was a place where bright minds gathered, but even here, Einstein stood out. He had a gift, yes, but also a stubborn spirit that refused to play by the rules. While other students followed the syllabus and took detailed notes, Einstein often skipped class. He preferred to learn on his own, diving into Maxwell's electromagnetic theory and other advanced works few students dared to touch. His professors didn't appreciate this independent streak. They saw him as disrespectful, unruly, even arrogant. One professor, frustrated with Einstein's attitude, warned colleagues not to give him a job after graduation. In a world where connections mattered just as much as talent, this was a serious blow. Still, Einstein pressed on. He spent long nights reading, theorizing, scribbling equations in dim candlelight. He fell in love with thought experiments, mental games that pushed the boundaries of logic and imagination. One of his favorites: what would it be like to ride on a beam of light? That question would haunt him for years. Outside of school, Einstein's life was full of pressure and uncertainty. His father's business ventures had failed again. His family's finances were weak. And he had fallen deeply in love with a fellow student named Mileva Marek. Mileva was intelligent, serious, and determined. As one of the few women studying physics at the time, she understood Einstein's passion, his need to question everything. They debated science late into the night. They challenged each other. They dreamed of changing the world together. But their relationship was controversial. His family disapproved, especially his mother, who saw Mileva as too dark, too serious, too foreign. And then came a new complication: Mileva became pregnant. In 1902, she gave birth to a daughter, Liesl, in secret. The details around the child's fate remain a mystery to this day. Some say she died young, others believe she was given up for adoption. Einstein never spoke of her publicly. That silence, too, became part of his burden. Meanwhile, the job market had turned cold. Einstein had graduated with solid grades in math and physics, but no recommendation letters, no influential supporters, and a growing sense that the academic world had closed its doors on him. He applied to dozens of universities. No response. He even tried becoming a high school teacher. Rejected. Eventually, through the help of a friend's father, Einstein landed a humble job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern in 1902. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even scientific. But it paid the bills. Each day, he reviewed technical documents for originality and accuracy. Electrical devices, mechanical tools, machines of all kinds, he saw them all. And strangely, this work sharpened his thinking. It taught him how to dissect ideas, how to recognize innovation buried in ordinary words. During these years, he worked by day and dreamed by night. He married Mileva in 1903. They lived modestly in a small apartment, raising their son Hans Albert. And quietly, Albert Einstein began developing theories that no one else could see coming. He wrote papers on thermodynamics, on the nature of light, on the relationship between energy and mass. It was a slow, invisible journey, without titles, without applause. But something extraordinary was about to break through. Have you ever felt like the world wasn't watching, even as you were giving it your best? How do you stay motivated when your talents go unseen? Share your thoughts in the comments. The year was 1905. Einstein was 26 years old. Still working 6 days a week at the patent office, still unknown to the scientific world. But behind the scenes, his mind was on fire. That year, he published not one, not two, but 5 groundbreaking scientific papers in a single journal, Annalen der Physik, one of the most respected physics journals in Europe. Historians would later call it Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, his miracle year. Each paper tackled a different aspect of the universe, and together they began to unravel centuries of scientific certainty. The first paper offered a radical idea that light could behave not just like a wave, but also like a particle, tiny packets of energy later called photons. It challenged the wave theory of light that had dominated for decades. This idea helped explain the photoelectric effect, a mystery no one had fully solved, and would eventually win him the Nobel Prize. His second paper explained how to measure atoms and molecules by analyzing the Brownian motion, the jittery movement of particles suspended in liquid. It provided physical proof of the existence of atoms, something many scientists still debated at the time. Then came the third paper. And with it, the beginning of a revolution. In June 1905, Einstein published On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies. It introduced what we now call the special theory of relativity. It questioned the very fabric of reality. Imagine this: what if time didn't tick the same for everyone? What if space wasn't fixed? What if the speed of light, regardless of who's moving, was always constant? According to Einstein, time and space were not separate things. They were part of a single entity, space-time. And when you move faster, time slows down. Distances shrink. Mass increases. The universe bends around motion in ways that defied ordinary logic. The idea was mind-bending. And yet, Einstein had come to it through pure thought, through elegant logic and relentless questioning. Finally, in his fourth paper, he derived a formula that would become one of the most famous equations in history. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass multiplied by the square of the speed of light. In other words, mass and energy are interchangeable. Even a small amount of mass could be converted into an enormous amount of energy. This simple formula would one day open the door to nuclear power and nuclear weapons. At first, the academic world didn't know what to make of it. Einstein wasn't a university professor. He had no lab, no grant, no title. Just ideas and clarity. But slowly, his work began to ripple out. Max Planck, a respected German physicist and father of quantum theory, recognized Einstein's brilliance. He began to speak of him publicly, helping open doors that had long been shut. Still, acceptance wasn't easy. Many found Einstein's ideas too radical. Others dismissed them entirely. The world of science was not ready to rewrite its foundation overnight. And back at home, Einstein's life was still far from peaceful. His marriage with Mileva was beginning to strain. Financial pressures lingered. And despite his intellectual success, he still lacked a permanent academic position. But something had changed. Einstein had moved from outsider to insider, though reluctantly. His name was beginning to echo across Europe. Young physicists started to follow his work, eager to understand the strange beauty of relativity. He had reached a turning point. But with recognition came new tension. If the world finally listened, could it also truly understand? And what would Einstein do with the power of his rising fame? Let's pause for a moment. Do you think the scientific community would have accepted Einstein's ideas if Max Planck hadn't supported him? How important is it to have a mentor or sponsor when your ideas challenge the norm? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Fame had come, but not on Einstein's terms. By 1914, Einstein had become a professor in Berlin and a member of the Prussian Academy of Sciences. It was a prestigious position, and his name was finally recognized in the upper circles of theoretical physics. But as Europe teetered on the brink of war, the world around him grew darker by the day. World War I erupted. And with it came a wave of nationalism that swept across Germany. Einstein, a pacifist, watched in horror as fellow scientists signed a document supporting Germany's military aggression, the Manifesto of the 93. His colleagues, brilliant minds, were swept up in patriotism. But Einstein refused. He was one of the few German intellectuals who stood against the war, openly and fearlessly. He joined a counter-movement, the Manifesto to the Europeans, calling for peace and unity. It gained little attention at the time, but it showed his character. At the same time, his personal life was collapsing. Einstein's marriage to Mileva had reached its breaking point. The pressures of academic life, the emotional distance, and his increasing devotion to his work left little room for their already fragile relationship. In 1914, as Einstein took his position in Berlin, Mileva left him and returned to Zurich with their 2 sons. They never lived together again. Einstein continued to support them financially, but the pain was real. Letters from that period show a man torn, brilliant in mind, but fractured in spirit. And yet, amidst the emotional turmoil, his work only deepened. He had realized that the special theory of relativity, elegant though it was incomplete. It didn't account for gravity. So he began developing something bigger. Something bolder. The general theory of relativity. The challenge was immense. Unlike the neat framework of Newtonian physics, Einstein's new vision proposed that gravity was not a force, but a curvature in space-time. Massive objects, like stars or planets, bent the fabric of space-time around them. And this bending was what we experienced as gravity. It was a revolutionary concept. But Einstein didn't stop at theory. He needed to prove it. He worked tirelessly, revising equations, corresponding with mathematicians, and facing failure after failure. In 1915, he presented his final form of the general theory to the Prussian Academy. It was elegant, stunning, and wildly ambitious. But no theory, no matter how beautiful, is accepted without proof. Then came an opportunity, a solar eclipse. If Einstein was right, the light from distant stars passing near the sun would be bent, deflected, by the sun's gravity. But such an effect could only be measured during a total solar eclipse, when the sun's brightness would be blocked out. Unfortunately, World War I made any international scientific collaboration nearly impossible. And yet, far away in England, a young astronomer named Arthur Eddington had read Einstein's papers. And despite being from an enemy nation, Eddington saw something in Einstein's work that transcended politics. After the war ended, Eddington led an expedition to observe the 1919 eclipse off the coast of West Africa. The tension was high. The data was delicate. Months passed as they analyzed the results. Then came the moment that changed everything. Eddington announced, Einstein was right. The starlight had bent, just as predicted by general relativity. Einstein's theory was not just a beautiful thought, it described the real universe. Overnight, Einstein became a global celebrity. Headlines declared, "A new theory of the universe. Einstein overthrows Newton." But this fame was different. It was dazzling, yes, but also invasive. Reporters followed him. Scientists debated him. Political groups tried to use him. And anti-Semitic voices in Germany began to attack him. Through it all, Einstein remained composed. He once said, "With fame, I become more and more stupid," which of course is a very common phenomenon. Still, he had made a choice. He had sacrificed stability, faced public backlash, and lost a family, all to pursue truth. Was it worth it? What would you have done in Einstein's position? Pursue the unknown at great personal cost, or choose the quiet path of comfort and acceptance? Einstein had become a legend. A man whose ideas reshaped not only physics but our entire understanding of the universe. In the years following the 1919 eclipse, he was celebrated on every continent. He toured Europe, the United States, Japan. Wherever he went, crowds gathered not to hear a king or a rock star, but to witness a thinker who dared to question the cosmos. For the first time, the public embraced science not just as knowledge, but as a form of wonder. And at the center of it all was Albert Einstein. The man with the wild hair, the mischievous eyes, and the unstoppable curiosity. But behind the scenes, Einstein remained deeply committed to his work and ideals. He continued to refine the mathematics behind general relativity, exploring its implications for the expanding universe, black holes, and even time itself. Though many of these discoveries would take decades to prove, the seeds were planted. In 1921, he received the Nobel Prize in Physics. Interestingly, the award wasn't for his theory of relativity. It was still too controversial for some, but for his work on the photoelectric effect, which laid the foundation for quantum theory and modern electronics. In short, while the world cheered relativity, Einstein quietly helped build the future of quantum mechanics, another pillar of modern physics. But Einstein's impact wasn't limited to science alone. He became a symbol of intellectual freedom, humanitarianism, and moral courage. He was outspoken against anti-Semitism, nationalism, and the oppression of minorities. He supported the rights of African Americans in the U.S., spoke out against fascism in Europe, and remained a staunch advocate for pacifism. He once said, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." Yet that curiosity had earned him global influence. Still, victory brought its own burdens. As the 1930s dawned, the world changed again, this time, ominously. In Germany, Adolf Hitler's rise to power unleashed a wave of terror. Jewish scientists were expelled. Books were burned. Universities were purged of free thought. Einstein, who had been living abroad, realized he could not return home. His property in Germany was seized. A Nazi newspaper published a headline, "Not yet hanged, Albert Einstein." He became a target, his very existence, a threat to the ideology of hate. So Einstein made a painful choice. He renounced his German citizenship, for the second time in his life, and immigrated to the United States in 1933. He settled at the newly formed Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. There, surrounded by scholars from around the world, he continued his scientific explorations, even as war loomed once more over the globe. And then came a dark twist in the story, one that would test everything Einstein stood for. In 1939, news reached Einstein that German scientists were working on a terrifying possibility, a nuclear bomb. A device that could unleash unimaginable destruction, using the very physics he had helped discover. Einstein, though not part of the weapons project, was urged by fellow scientists to act. They feared that if Germany got the bomb first, civilization itself could be at risk. And so, Einstein signed a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning of the danger and urging the U.S. to accelerate its own atomic research. That letter helped ignite the Manhattan Project. Years later, after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Einstein would say, "Had I known that the Germans would not succeed in developing an atomic bomb, I would have done nothing." It was a heavy burden, one he carried for the rest of his life. Here was the irony. The man who changed the world with the beauty of an equation now saw that same beauty twisted into destruction. After the war, Albert Einstein was a man both revered and troubled. He had helped alert the world to the threat of nuclear weapons, but the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki left a permanent scar on his conscience. He spent the final years of his life not in triumph, but in deep reflection. Though he had not worked directly on the bomb, he felt a moral responsibility for the knowledge that made it possible. It was a haunting paradox. The pursuit of truth had led to the power to destroy. So, Einstein turned his attention to peace. He became a vocal advocate for nuclear disarmament, global cooperation, and the creation of a world government that could prevent another catastrophe. He wrote letters to leaders, spoke at conferences, and worked with scientists and philosophers to promote reason over fear. Einstein believed that education, not fear, was humanity's best hope. He once said, "Peace cannot be kept by force, it can only be achieved by understanding." Even as he aged, his curiosity never faded. In the quiet of Princeton, he continued to work on what he called a unified field theory, a grand idea to connect all the forces of nature into a single framework. Though he never completed it, the effort symbolized the way he lived, always asking, always seeking, always hoping. He rejected fame. He refused political office. He declined offers to become president of Israel. To him, truth was more sacred than power. Einstein died on April 18, 1955, at the age of 76. In his final hours, he whispered words in German, unheard by the American nurse who stood beside him. Even in death, he remained a mystery. Yet his legacy is everywhere. Today, the theory of relativity is used in GPS technology, satellite systems, space exploration, and even in understanding the age of the universe. The photoelectric effect laid the groundwork for solar panels and digital cameras. His insights underpin quantum mechanics, astrophysics, and the technology behind your smartphone. But perhaps Einstein's most powerful legacy isn't in science, it's in the spirit of inquiry he inspired. He taught the world that it's okay to ask why. That imagination matters. That simplicity hides beauty. That we should never stop learning. He was a symbol of resilience, of standing up for truth in the face of hatred, of choosing curiosity over comfort, even when the price was exile, isolation, or misunderstanding. So here's a question for you. If you had been in Einstein's shoes, would you have signed that letter to the president, knowing what it might lead to? Think deeply, and share your thoughts in the comments. Dear learners, you've just traveled through the remarkable life of Albert Einstein, a man who began as a misunderstood child, dared to question the rules of science, and reshaped how we understand time, space, and even reality itself. But beyond the formulas and fame, Einstein left us something even more valuable, a model of how to live with integrity, wonder, and courage. He showed us that the greatest discoveries don't come from certainty, but from the willingness to doubt, to ask, and to imagine. He wasn't perfect. He struggled with guilt, loneliness, and the burden of responsibility. But through it all, he stayed true to the idea that knowledge must serve humanity, not control it. So the next time you feel small in a complex world, remember what Einstein taught us. A person who never made a mistake never tried anything new. You too have the power to question, to learn, to create, to make your mark. Whether you're studying English, exploring science, or facing life's challenges, stay curious. Stay kind. Stay courageous. If Einstein's story touched your heart or made you see the world differently, Please share this video with someone who needs inspiration today. Leave a comment below. What lesson from Einstein's journey stays with you the most? Let's carry forward his message together. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want more true stories that help you learn English and see life in a new light. Until next time, keep learning, keep wondering, and never stop asking why. Goodbye for now.